Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce Lawrence Wollersheim and Leonard Kamner to talk about climate resilience, some of the problems we're facing and some of the solutions that they see we can be learning about and taking action on. Thanks, both of you.
Thanks so much, Marina. Thank you for being here, Lawrence. I'm really excited to talk about our project, Climate Safe Villages, and why this is so important, this work to educate people and come together to prepare and build resilience for these climate conditions. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to ask Lawrence some questions. Lawrence is one of our science advisors and our board chair on Climate Safe Villages. So Lawrence, can you provide an overview of the problem at hand here, what we are talking about in terms of climate change consequences?
Very simply, we have a situation where we have accelerating climate change consequences, and they're unavoidable, the ones that are coming, because we did not cut our fossil fuel use 60 years ago, 50 years ago, 40 years ago. You get the idea. So with all that lack of, action, we're now in this crisis state where the consequences, rather severe and catastrophic consequences, are now unavoidable and they're coming. But that's not the worst thing. Most people, even our governments, are so inadequately prepared for the fast acceleration of these massive global consequences from climate change that we're going to be facing a very destabilizing situation for your individual family, for your business, for your local community, even your nation, and the whole planet itself. So that is the core problem. Unavoidable, serious consequences, failure to acknowledge, failure to fix, not prepared in any shape, manner, or form.
Can you tell us about yourself, Lawrence, and the other folks researching this involved with Climate Safe Villages, and where our viewers can find out more about you and this project?
Sure. I'm an executive director and a researcher at Job One for Humanity. There's a group of climate change scientists and researchers who are working anonymously and as volunteers to produce uncensored climate facts. The reason this climate think tank is so important is because the global fossil fuel cartel has literally spent billions and billions of dollars on disinformation to make you feel there is no problem with climate change, to make you feel safe, and that we're making progress in fixing it. If you do see climate change consequences, you keep seeing in the news, we're doing this, we're doing that, and you believe this is adequate progress to keep you safe, and all of it is not true. And this group of scientists who work anonymously because of harassment and retribution from the fossil fuel cartel feel that unless we keep putting out these accurate, uncensored, unpoliticized facts about the climate, it's going to get away from us, and this is going to be humanity's greatest nightmare.
Thanks, Lawrence. Can you tell us about the most crucial climate change condition facts?
I mentioned one already, which is disinformation from the fossil fuel cartel. It has crippled our politicians, crippled our governments. It has infected the media. It has infected the IPCC, which is the world's authority on climate change. All of their work that comes out, on average, is 30 to 60% underestimated because of the massive disinformation, the billions and billions of dollars that are spent to convince us through the tentacles of the global fossil fuel cartel, we're safe, we're making progress, there's no big problem, keep buying our fossil fuels, we need the profits. Now, that's the one that we've already mentioned. The second one is our governments, and it's implied in the first one, our governments have completely failed to protect us. There's just no other way of saying it. climate change is on the verge of going out of control. What I mean by that is probably another key fact. Right now, greenhouse gases, particularly carbon, is at a very, very high level. The carbon level, which is the most common measurement of greenhouse gas and the future of global warming, is at about 423 parts per million in the atmosphere. When we hit 425 into 450, we go into a range that is so dangerous. James Hansen, one of the founders and forefathers of warning us 60 years ago, 50 years ago about how bad climate change was, described the first climate change irreversible level. We passed that in 2015. This is the second irreversible climate change level. And if we pass 450 carbon, we go past that, and estimates are that it could happen as soon as 2031. So this period from now until 2031 is critical. But if we pass that, we enter into a place where global temperatures they can't go less than 2.7 to 3 degrees Celsius higher. But the catch-22 is if they go to 2.7 or 3 degrees Celsius higher, they will go to 4 degrees, they will go to 5 degrees, and they will probably go to 6 and on up. It's called runaway global warming. So we have to stay below carbon 450, or we're in extremely high risk, high probability of moving ourselves into runaway global warming, where 30% of the population would be lucky to survive past 2050, more likely even less than that. So that's the key issue. So this time frame between 2025 and 2031 is this period of dramatic climate change consequence acceleration. More tipping points are going to be crossed, more what they call positive feedbacks. That's nothing more like when you hold a mic up and it feeds back and you have to move it away. It keeps making louder noises. It's called a feedback. So it's really this issue of we're going to face more severe, more frequent, and these consequences of the climate change at greater and greater scale during this period from 2025 to 2031. And it's not just going to go gradual, like my finger gradually going like this. It's going to go like this. And that's the unpreparedness curve that our governments, our businesses, our families are completely vulnerable to.
Could you take a moment and talk about another board member involved with this project, Dr. Peter Carter, and his work and his research?
Dr. Peter Carter is willing to be not anonymous because he's been exposing the lies in the climate change media, etc., for a long time. Peter was a member of the United States, the UN's intergovernmental panel on climate change, which was the world's leading authority on climate change. And he started to expose these errors, serious errors and underestimation. And he got pummeled quite a bit for standing up and saying what we're putting out isn't accurate. He's primarily responsible, along with a few other scientists, for exposing probably the biggest single lie that we're being told. And it's very technical, but it changes when you put the right number. Most people know what a mathematical constant is. If I say the constant is 3 and you multiply everything by 3, it gives you a certain total. But if I say that constant was wrong and it's actually 5, it changes everything radically. Peter went in and found the most important, among other scientists, the most important constant in every major calculation for the consequences and the solutions of climate change are dependent on this one number. And the one number was underestimated by 30 to 60% because of unseen influences. Peter is a giant and an incredibly courageous climate researcher, climate scientist who stands up every day publicly and takes whatever is thrown at him.
I am so appreciative to have his expertise on this project as well. And on the number that you mentioned, maybe we can link after this video to a recent video by scientist Sabina Hassenfelder about that number and why there's growing realization that, to your point, that number it's been underestimated all this time.
Correct. It's called the climate sensitivity number. And both Peter and our organization for close to a decade have been saying, this is baloney. This is a complete lie. And now finally, enough people have gone and redone the research and looked at it, and more research is coming out. James Hansen, be sure to link James Hansen's new study on climate sensitivity. Just came out last end of 2023, and you will see that, my God, we have been completely lied to about how bad it's going to get, when it's going to occur, the things we need to know to plan, to be resilient, to be prepared.
What is the Climate Change Disaster Preparation, Adaptation, and Recovery Guidebook?
It's something, the Climate Safe Village project that you're executive director of, and you mentioned at the beginning, was an idea in a different name many years ago from a group of us researchers and scientists, because we saw that there are consequences now that are so severe and they're unavoidable, and we're not prepared. And we saw the government wasn't preparing. It wasn't even acknowledging there's a problem. So we said, we've got to create a model for communities, villages that can spread around the world, so independent individuals who understand what's coming or intuitively sense what's coming, either they read all the science or they got this gut feeling that's tearing them apart, that they need to get their family safe and their business safe. We said we have to do something, and we put the brain trust of our think tank onto creating what would be a master model for something that could sustain itself from all of the climate consequences that are coming, but not just the climate consequences. These climate consequences swing into every other major problem we face in the world today, and they amplify and they magnify many of those other problems, which you will also have to deal with as the climate deteriorates and destabilizes. So this model that we created was designed to take on basically most, if not all, of the consequences we are going to face, so that the best of humanity and at least some of our civilization can survive to carry on in these multiple experimental communities all over the world. It's going to take thousands of them, because evolution doesn't do anything in ones and twos. To make something survive through evolution, it runs multiple experiments simultaneously with many mutations, and then a few of them make it on down the road. So that was the idea behind Climate Safe Villages, and why Climate Safe Villages is so important at this time in history. Our governments are failing, our businesses aren't really preparing, the organizations, the big environmental groups got sucked into the disinformation. They're not telling their members, you need to start preparing. You need to start becoming climate resilient. You need to start adapting. You need to start, if you're living in the wrong place, you need to think about migration. That's not being said. That's why Climate Safe Villages, the model, was created, to put it out there and keep putting it out there. And those that get it will start, and we've got a chance, a small flicker of hope, a small beacon of light in these communities and in the community model that we share. The idea was share it openly, open source it, because we can't afford not to cooperate when things are getting worse so much faster.
Yeah, if I could share an anecdote really quick, we actually have a recent volunteer that's joined us. He's a professional climate scientist, and he works at a very mainstream climate organization. And he let me know, without revealing any personal information, that he's internally been trying to sound the alarm about these organizations telling people the truth about how serious this is going to be. And he let me know how much that is shut down. People are not allowed to talk that way, and I think that really goes to your point. Another thing I want to mention is, if you go to our website, climatesafevillages.org, we have a free PDF guide to building climate resilience. So a really great actionable guide to get you started in what you can do to start preparing for these climate conditions. So please go to our website, check out our resources, and take advantage of that free resource. Lawrence, you mentioned climate change migration.
Yes,
Can you speak more about that and why that's important?
I definitely can. I just wanted to add one thing to the preparation and resilience and adaptation models. Because around 2025, we enter into that zone from carbon 425 to carbon 450 up until 2031. There is a real urgency to make your preparations and get started now. The consequences will accelerate so fast that if you're not really prepared for them, you will suffer needlessly. Additionally, the urgency is that more and more people are going to see this climate thing is just getting worse and worse and worse, and the climate denial will start breaking down as people get pummeled with severe consequences, which means more and more people are going to be buying emergency supplies, adaptation supplies, moving, etc., all very quickly. And whenever that happens, prices soar, you can't get what you need, and it becomes very difficult to do what was very simple and inexpensive if you had done it before the emergency was raging. So please do not think you can wait till, 2030, 20, later on, far into the future, and not get pummeled with consequences and suffer cost and scarcity and many other issues as everybody is racing to try to prepare their loved ones, their businesses, and their nations to survive what's coming. Oh, migration. In general, you want to be close to the 45th parallel north or south. You want to have a clean, fresh water source abundantly available. In the areas far below the 45th parallel, you're going to be pummeled with heat, humidity, rain bombs, so many different consequences that will radically affect food and food growing and your ability to work and live outside. Most people don't understand that if the humidity is 100%, it's 105 degrees, you can't work outside very long unless you have an environmental suit. Humidity will kill you faster than the heat when it's combined with heat. So there's going to be vast areas south of the 45th parallel, north and south, that'll be basically places where humans can't work outdoors for long periods of time, and crops can't grow because they're pummeled with cold spells, droughts, rain bombs, windstorms. We had $1 billion windstorm in the United States called the derecho last year that destroyed $1 billion worth of corn by blowing it over in the middle of the season. It was unsalvageable. It blew all the stocks over. So this migration issue, if you're, generally younger and you have a family, you have to seriously consider, do you want to get, your family up close to the 45th parallel, where you're still going to have lots of consequences, believe it. You're going to have lots of consequences, and you're going to have to grow food 4 seasons using grow rooms and other things, but you will have less heat, less humidity. You'll have spells of high humidity and high heat. They're called heat bombs or heat domes. But in general, uh, you will be able to survive longer and more comfortably farther north, but not too far north. Here's the other side of migration. You get above the 50th parallel up there, the heat's going to rise 2 to 4 times faster. The soils are terrible. So even in the summer growing season, it's going to be hard to grow stuff. And because the permafrost is going to melt in many areas, the roads, the plumbing, the gas pipes, everything's going to, not everything, but the infrastructure is going to deteriorate so quickly because it was all based on permafrost. You build it into the permafrost, it never moves. Once the permafrost melts, you go from there. The other thing far north is you have viruses and bacteria that humanity hasn't seen for hundreds of thousands of years that will come racing out of the permafrost. Permafrost is decaying animals and plants, and it will spread all over. And it's just going to be very, very tough unless you're in what I call a microclimate in those areas above the 50th parallel north or south. So what this means is there's about 5% of the Earth's surface where humanity is going to have to migrate to and survive and be super efficient at growing food, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a pretty tough scenario. Our website and what you get access to if you become active at Climate Safe Villages, but we have a whole section on migration in our members section at Job One. And if you go to Climate Safe Villages and you become an active person and help others, you will be given free access.
So, how can individuals and communities get involved and take action?
I tell most people right away, start your emergency preparation, your adaptation, and your climate resilience building program, because we're at the cusp of the rapid acceleration of consequences. We're sitting, at the end of 2024, we could be entering that zone. That's the first thing I say. The second thing I say is get involved in programs like Climate Justice Now, which is helping victims collect the damages they're suffering, collect their financial restitution for the damages they're suffering in climate change. That and maybe a few other programs going on around the world have some chance of reeling in the global fossil fuel cartel and causing a rapid reduction in fossil fuel use. We have to reduce global fossil fuel use so radically in order to have a tiny, right now we're at that place where pretty much half of humanity is going to not make it because we have ignored 60 years of fossil fuel reduction, and the reductions we need to make now are about 75%. We need to reduce global fossil fuel use by 75% at the latest in order to stop crossing the 450 carbon ppm, parts per million threshold. I call it the last chance for humanity threshold. At the latest, and if humanity is very lucky, we need to reduce global fossil fuel use by 75% by 2031. But we really should be doing that like right now, because we're in the uncertainty zone where all we're doing is possibly killing more and more people the longer it takes us to get to the 75% reduction. And the 75% reduction, which we estimate will be needed to keep us from crossing carbon 450, is what we calculate to be the absolute minimum level of fossil fuel reduction to save possibly, if we could do that, we could save possibly 50% of humanity, more likely considerably less. But if we don't hit that minimum, that 30% of humanity after 2050 that I said could survive, that could be a lot less too. You asked, what can people do? Get ready, prepare, and do everything you can to get the world, like with programs like Climate Justice Now and other programs, to make that 75% global fossil fuel reduction, so there's something left on the other end. We're not down to 1 or 2% of humanity struggling in a Mad Max world, entering a new dark age. That is the future that no one wants to live through. So prepare and do everything in your power. Now, a lot of us don't have direct powers to influence our politicians or governments, but you can reach out to a business or another individual or a farmer who's been harmed by climate change, and you can tell them there's this program to get financial restitution that will also help save the planet and save the future and save humanity. Here's the link. They can do that. That's simple.
Lawrence, could you talk about the charitable mission of Climate Safe Villages and how it's seeking to help those who may be the most vulnerable to climate change and those with the least resources?
Climate Safe Villages has taken the model that this group of researchers worked on for years at Job One, and one key part of that model was the open source sharing and making it affordable to everyone. This isn't billionaire bunkers. This isn't I win, you lose survivalists. Okay. This is we win, we survive, and we thrive by including everyone, having these wonderful advisory groups that cover every aspect of food growing, architecture, community layout and design, community best policies for these communities to survive and thrive through everything that's going on. And they share it. Any community, they don't even have to be a completely aligned climate safe village community or started by us. Other eco villages and other communities come in and they share their knowledge. This is an open source sharing collaboration that no one is excluded from, that is designed to get this information out into as many places as possible, building as many experimental communities as possible, and making them affordable to everyone. The Climate Safe Village model has all of these things for younger people, middle-aged people, older people, to collaborate together and support each other. Because at this point, if you are not collaborative and you are not in reciprocating relationships as we go into these accelerating crises, it's going to be very hard to make it. So the whole model of Climate Safe Villages is to be collaborative, reciprocating, supportive of all people, no matter what their income source is. I mean, we don't give celebrities or rich people any special place in our organization. They're not anything more than another human being that's trying to figure out how to work together and survive what's coming. So does that help a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's been an amazingly supportive community, a really positive group of honest and realistic people. So yeah, I really agree with that.
Many people can't migrate, don't want to migrate, are too old to migrate. So Climate Safe Villages has a whole system and of tools and support to help you take wherever you live and make it as climate resilient as possible. I'll give you two examples of local climate resilience, and I'll explain why they're so important. There's wind and fire are going to be a massive, underestimated problem for the future. Wherever you're close to forests or anything that will burn, and the wind issue will be global. Let me take the wind issue. When this is, I'm going to get a little technical. The atmosphere has a layer at the top that acts like the lid on a pressure cooker. So everybody knows most people know what a pressure cooker is. So when global warming heats up the atmosphere, the heat creates an agitation, like the bubbling when you turn up the water in a pressure cooker, the water bubbles more and more vigorously inside the pressure cooker. Well, global warming is inside the pressure cooker of the Earth's atmosphere, creating more and more turbulence. And as it keeps getting warmer, the turbulence gets worse and worse. The future, they're already predicting climate category 6 hurricanes of 180 to 240 miles an hour. So that means that most places on the Earth can expect winds up to maybe as 100 miles an hour or more, when different things like derechos, which is a sudden windstorm, or other types of winds associated with extreme weather occur. Most places are not equipped to deal with 100, 120, 130 mile an hour winds. So home design has to take into account, like round homes slough off, the wind, earth sheltered homes slough off the wind. There's many things, reinforced homes can slough off the wind. So this wind issue is major in the future. If you are not thinking about wind blowing things away and destroying them, you're missing a big piece of climate resilience. The other thing is fire. As heat goes up, the forests dry out. We are going to see, for the next 20 years until these forests are burned out, we are going to see massive forest fires across northern United States, across Canada, across Europe, across South America and other places, across Russia. That's going to, going to have the massive smoke all over the planet, making it harder to breathe, making it even worse. But you're going to have homes that are prepared to deal with fire. Again, an underground or a bermed home does that. But fire is a major risk factor in our climate future, along with wind. And just a little sidebar on the wind, you won't see it because the airlines are going to suppress it, but you're going to have bumpier and bumpier flights, and you're going to hear about more severe turbulence and more people getting hurt in severe turbulence, because that's part of heated up. It's like a pressure cooker. The atmosphere is boiling, and the airlines are like struggling to find radars that will keep them out of the air pockets and the most severe turbulence in the future, because air travel is not going to be much fun, and it's not that much fun already. Some people know it from looking at the science. Some people sense it intuitively, but they know things are going to get worse with the climate, and they need to prepare. There was a gentleman in Texas who everybody laughed at, and he built a air tube dam around his home. It was 3 or 4 feet high, and people laughed at it. It looked like he had a donut surrounding his house, like 4 feet high, his whole yard. They laughed and laughed and laughed, and then the massive flood came down in, I think it was the Houston area, I'm not sure exactly, and they had 3 feet of water, and his neighbors all flooded out, and guess who didn't flood out? There are homes that have already been built around the world that are what I call bermed. They're 3-sided or 2-sided with earth sheltering. There's complete earth shelters homes. There's wind-resistant homes that, when the worst of it happens, and they've already been reinforced, when the worst winds and the worst storms come, they're already prepared. There are people who are, the simple thing of taking their existing sump pump out of their basement, because we're going to have rain bombs, and you take your sump pump out and you go buy the biggest industrial, you had a 2-inch pipe in your sump pump, you go get a 6-inch pipe for your sump pump in your basement that can pump 6 times the amount of water that the old one did, because they know their basements are going to flood. You know, there's many people who already are doing this. There's a large movement around the world. This isn't something new. People who have lived on the coasts have built their homes on stilts because they knew storms would come and wash away everything else. The problem now is the storms that are coming everywhere, and they're going to drop massive amounts of water, because the massive amounts of water are part of the global warming process. Global warming evaporates, melts ice, evaporates oceans, evaporates ice. All that moisture that was never there from all these melting things and all the heat causing evaporation has to come down. And when it comes down harder than it's ever come down before. And every degree of increase in global temperature means harder and harder rainstorms, deluges, more flooding, no matter where you live, especially if you're near a floodplain. The 100-year floodplains, throw them away. You need to look at a 1,000-year floodplain, 25 or more feet higher than the 100 feet floodplain that they used to have, because you're going to see up to 30 inches of rain fall over 2 days. No sewage system in any city is prepared for that. No rural area that gets 30 inches of rain in 2 days is going to be able to move that water effectively with their existing water systems. So this is our future, and our governments are not taking the lead and saying to us, we got to quickly change our focus, start adapting emergency preparations. You don't hear a word of it. Not a word.